That morning, Violet Pemford learned everything. Her hairpins were still in place. Her eyes weren't fully open yet. The knock came. Twice. 3 times. And Mary's voice. "My lady. Please. You need to come downstairs." Mary never said, "Please." Her father was sitting downstairs. The drawing room was dark. The curtains were still closed. The candles burned out. Empty glasses on the table. Sir Edmund Pemford sat slumped in his chair, his hands clasped on his knees, not looking at Violet. Violet made him look at her. "Father." The man lifted his head. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from lack of sleep, or drink, or both. "Sit," he said. "I'll stand." Sir Edmund said nothing. He picked up the paper on the table and held it out. Violet took it. She read it. Once. Twice. She stopped the 3rd time because her hands had begun to shake, and she didn't want him to see. The paper was an official document. 2 names were written at the top. Sir Edmund Pemford, James Calder, Duke of Hartwell. Below them were numbers, all of her father's debts, listed one by one. And at the bottom, a single sentence. In return, Miss Violet Pemford, through marriage. Violet placed the paper back on the table. Slowly, carefully, as if dropping it too fast might break something. "When?" she asked. "Last night. Were you drunk?" The man looked away. "A little." Violet turned. She walked to the window. Inside her there was a storm. Anger, fear, shame, not for herself, but for the man sitting in that chair. But she said none of it, because saying it would change nothing. The paper had been signed. The debts were real, and the Pemford family had no other way out. She knew that too. "Who is Calder?" she asked. "The Duke of Hartwell, North Yorkshire." "Do you know him?" Her father hesitated. "I used to." "Used to?" Violet turned back. "What does that mean?" "There's an old matter between us, a land dispute, never quite settled. And he found you at a gambling table." He started, then stopped. "I didn't know he was at that table." Violet looked at her father. For a long moment. "I didn't know. Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't." It didn't matter anymore. "When is Calder coming?" "This afternoon." Violet went up to her room. She closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands were still shaking. And now she didn't have to hide it. She was alone. The Duke of Hartwell. She had only heard the name. Everyone in society had. The richest man in the north. The coldest man. The man seen the least. He rarely came down to London. Even more rarely to balls. But he had Kubulta come once. Last autumn, at Pembury's gathering. Violet hadn't even noticed him that night. The room had been crowded, and she had been speaking with someone else. Only for a moment, as she was leaving through the doorway, they had crossed paths. A dark suit. Tall. His face. Cold. Like ice. But his eyes had rested on Violet for a second. Just 1 second. Violet had forgotten that look. Now she remembered. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, the carriage arrived. Violet watched from the window. Black, large, bearing the Yorkshire crest. The driver stepped down and opened the door. James Calder stepped out. He was as tall as he had been that night at Pembury, standing just as straight. A dark blue coat, a hat had on his head. He looked over the garden. 1 second, 2 seconds, then walked toward the door. Violet stepped away from the window. She took a breath. Then she went downstairs. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. Calder was in the drawing room. He was standing. He hadn't sat down, and it was clear he had no intention of sitting. When Violet entered, the man turned. His eyes were the same, just like that night at Pembury. Dark, calm, revealing nothing. He looked at Violet, not from head to toe, only at her face. 1 second. Then he inclined his head. Miss Pemford. Lord Calder. Violet stopped. She didn't move across the table. She stayed near the door. Would you like to sit? No. Neither would I. A brief silence. Panic flickered in her father's eyes. Violet didn't care. Then, Calder said. His voice was low. There was no London accent, just the flat, hard voice of the North. You've seen the document. I have. And? Violet looked straight at him. And there's something I want to ask. Calder waited. There's an old matter between you and the Pemford family. She paused. Is this marriage a continuation of that matter? The room fell silent. Her father shifted in his seat. Violet, this. Father. One word. Quiet, but firm. The man fell silent. Calder looked at Violet, with that calm, measuring gaze, for a long moment. No, he said at last. Then why? 1 second passed. 2 seconds. The answer to that question, Calder said, will come with time. Violet felt something stir inside her. Anger, curiosity, maybe both. She couldn't tell. Fine, she said, but I have a condition as well. Calder didn't raise an eyebrow. He simply waited. I will have my own space at Calder Hall. How I spend my time will not be questioned. And when this marriage ends, that decision will be mine. The room was silent. Her father was holding his breath. Calder looked at Violet. With those eyes, that calm expression that revealed nothing. All right, he said. One word. No bargaining. Violet hadn't expected that. She didn't show it. Then we have an agreement, she said. As Calder was leaving, he paused at the door. He turned. Violet was still standing in the same place, upright, silent, her hands at her sides. At the gathering in Pembury, he said quietly, last autumn, I saw you. Violet froze. I remembered, she said simply. Calder inclined his head and left. After the door closed, Violet didn't move for a long time. Her father was saying something, an apology, maybe an explanation. Violet didn't hear. I saw you at the gathering in Pembury. That table. That night. That single second. It hadn't been a coincidence. It had never been a coincidence. They left for Yorkshire 3 days later. Violet took 1 suitcase, 2 dresses, 3 books, a small brooch that had belonged to her mother. The rest stayed behind at the Pemford house. As she carried the suitcase to the door, her father followed her. Violet. She turned. The man had shrunk. Not just physically. Something inside him had collapsed too, as if he could no longer carry his own weight. I'm sorry, he said. Violet said nothing. You know. I know, Father. She paused. But an apology isn't enough. Not yet. The man closed his eyes. Violet picked up her suitcase and walked to the carriage. The journey took 4 hours. Calder sat across from her. He was reading a book, or pretending to. Violet looked out the window. London fell behind them, then the towns, then everything else. Yorkshire opened up, wide, empty, bleak. The sky hung low. The hills were dark. Was it beautiful? Maybe. But that morning, she wasn't looking for beauty. At one point, Calder closed his book. "You're not used to the cold," he said. Violet turned. "What?" "The north is different from London." He looked out the window. "The first winter is difficult." Violet tried to understand why he had said it. Was it a warning? A courtesy? It seemed like neither. Just a fact, plain and dry. "I'll get used to it," she said. Calder said nothing. He opened his book again. They first saw Calder Hall from the hill. As the carriage climbed, Violet leaned toward the window. In the distance, between the hills, stood a gray stone structure. It was large, very large. 3 floors, 2 wings, a tower in the center. Trees surrounded it, black, bare, stripped of their leaves by autumn. The manor wasn't beautiful. It was powerful, permanent, as if it hadn't been built there, but had risen from the land itself, from the hills, from deep within the soil. Violet felt something. She couldn't name it. Servants were waiting at the entrance. The housekeeper was Mrs. Graves, tall, gray-haired, her face like stone. She bowed to Calder, then turned to Violet. "Your Grace." Her voice was flat, neither warm nor cold. "Welcome." Violet stepped inside, and stopped. The corridor was long. A chandelier hung from the ceiling, dark and unlit. The paintings on the walls were large, and they all showed the same thing. Men, horses, dark moors. Calder's ancestors. Generation after generation of the same cold faces, the same rigid posture. There were no women in any of them. Her room was on the 2nd floor. Mrs. Graves opened the door. It was a large room. The fireplace was lit. The bed wide and made of dark wood. The hills visible through the window. Everything was in place, but it was cold. Not just the air. The walls were cold. The furniture was cold. There was something in the atmosphere, as if the room had been waiting for a long time and had grown used to waiting. "Did the previous lady of the house use this room?" Violet asked. Mrs. Graves paused. "Pardon?" "The Duke's mother, or anyone who lived here before." The woman's face shifted. Only slightly, but it shifted. "No," she said. "This room hasn't been used for a very long time." Violet waited. The woman did not continue. "Thank you, Mrs. Graves." Dinner was in the large dining room. The table was long. Violet sat at one end, Calder at the other. Between them were 12 chairs, empty, lined up, silent. Violet looked at the length of the table. "Is it like this every night?" she asked. Calder lifted his head. "What?" "Sitting this far apart." The man looked at the table, as if seeing it for the first time. "We can change it if you like," he said. "I do." A brief silence. Calder glanced at Mrs. Graves. The woman had already understood, and was moving. 5 minutes later, Violet's plate had been moved to the corner of the table, right beside Calder. The man wasn't bothered, but he was surprised. He couldn't hide that. Violet sat down. She unfolded her napkin. "Thank you," she said. Calder didn't reply. But for the first time that evening, he didn't bring a book with him. After dinner, Violet found the library. Alone. No one had shown her the way. She had walked the corridors, tried doors. The library was in the west wing, a large room with shelves reaching the ceiling. She stepped inside, lit the candles, looked at the shelves. Everything about the Calder family was here. History books, legal documents, the geography of Yorkshire. But one shelf held different books, novels, poetry, French literature. These were different, older. Their pages had been opened many more times. She pulled one out. Inside was a name, written in small, careful handwriting. Catherine Calder, 1871. Violet closed the book. Catherine, Calder's mother. Someone else? She placed it back on the shelf, but the name stayed in her mind. Late that night, as Violet returned to her room, she ran into Calder in the corridor. He was coming out of his study, a candle in his hand, still wearing his daytime clothes. When he saw Violet, he stopped. Neither of them spoke. Then Violet did. "There are books in the library, signed Catherine Calder." Calder's face didn't change, but something passed through his eyes. "My mother," he said. "She hasn't been here for a long time, has she?" 10 years. He paused. "She passed away. I'm sorry." The man inclined his head. He was about to pass. "Calder." He stopped. "If there's something in this house," Violet said, "that you don't want hidden from me, tell me. I'll find the rest myself anyway." A long silence. Calder looked at her with those dark, calm eyes. "Don't go to the east wing," he said at last. Violet raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Part of it hasn't been restored. The ceiling is dangerous." He paused. "1 second. Anything else?" Something appeared at the corner of Calder's mouth, like Blackwell in the red glove, but not quite. Less controlled. Less prepared. "That's all," he said. And he left. Violet returned to her room. She sat by the fireplace. The fire crackled softly. "Don't go to the east wing." He said the ceiling was dangerous. Maybe it was true. But when a man says don't go, and his eyes shift like that, Violet decided to wait until morning. She already knew she probably wouldn't wait very long. Violet waited 2 days. For 2 days, she learned the house, the corridors, the staircases, which doors creaked, which windows refused to open. She learned that Mrs. Graves was in the kitchen every morning at 8 and checked the accounts at 2 in the afternoon. That the maid Agnes was curious but kind. That the gardener Thomas hardly ever spoke. And she learned Calder. He woke early, earlier than Violet. He spent hours in his study. Sometimes he came down for lunch. Sometimes he didn't. At dinner, he was always at the table. Since Violet had shortened it, they sat side by side at the corner. The man spoke little, but when she asked something, he answered. Short, plain answers. But answers. On the evening of the second day, Violet asked, "When does winter start in Yorkshire?" Calder set down his glass. "It already has." "When?" "The day you arrived." Violet looked toward the window. Outside was dark, the wind striking the glass. "Then I'm late getting used to it," she said. Something passed through Calder's eyes, very quickly, but it was there. On the morning of the third day, Violet went to the east wing. She had woken early. The sky was barely light. She crossed the corridor, climbed the left staircase, and reached the door to the east wing. The door wasn't locked. She stepped inside. Calder had been right. The ceiling really was dangerous. In some places it had collapsed. In others, cracks ran through it. Damp had seeped into the walls. The room was cold, smelling faintly of mold. Her footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. But someone had used this place. Not recently, but not long ago either. In one corner stood an old desk. Dust covered it, but not much. A chair had fallen over. Near the window was a small chest, its lock already open. Violet walked to the chest. Inside were letters. She picked them up. Holding her candle close, she opened the first. The handwriting was neat, thin, slanted, a woman's hand. James, I don't know if you'll ever read these letters. Perhaps you never will, but I can't stop myself from writing. There are things I need to say, and I can't say them to your face because you never listen. You never have. Violet paused. James. Calder's name. This woman had been writing to him. She continued. You must end the Pemford matter. What Edward did no longer concerns you. It's over. 10 years have passed. Holding on to this hatred is destroying you, and I wish you could see that, but you refuse. Violet slowly lowered the letter. Pemford. Her father's name was Edward. She opened the other letters. Not all of them. There were too many, and she didn't have time. But she read a few. The woman was Calder's mother, Catherine. She had died 10 years ago, and before she died, she had written these letters to her son. The Pemford matter appeared again and again. The pieces were coming together, slowly, imperfectly, but they were coming together. 15 years ago, there had been a land dispute. The Pemford family had taken land belonging to Calder through a legal maneuver. It wasn't small land. It was the oldest property the Calder family had, inherited from Catherine's father. And Sir Edmund Pemford had been the architect of it. Violet closed the chest. Outside, the light had changed. Morning had come without her noticing. She stood and walked to the window. The Yorkshire moor stretched before her, grey, radiosity, endless. It was beautiful this morning, strangely beautiful. Violet closed her eyes. Sir Edmund Pemford, her father, Calder losing that land, Catherine's letters, 10 years of silent hatred, and that gambling table. It hadn't been a coincidence. It had never been a coincidence. Calder had sat at that table to take revenge on her father, to ruin him. But then, I saw you at the gathering in Pembury. Violet clenched her teeth. As Violet stepped out of the room, Calder was standing in the doorway. He wasn't holding a candle. He was dressed for the morning, his hair not fully arranged yet. When he saw Violet, something crossed his face. Not anger, something more complicated. Neither of them spoke. Then Violet did. I know who Catherine is, she said. I read the letters. Calder's jaw tightened. And I know about the Pemford matter, she continued. What my father did. Silence. Come inside, Calder said at last. His voice was flat, but something was in it. Weariness, perhaps, or relief. Violet couldn't tell. They sat across from each other in the study. Calder began to speak. Short sentences, plain, Not like someone telling a story, more like someone listing facts. 1878. A land dispute. Court. Sir Edmund's lawyer had falsified the documents. A small change. A big difference. Calder had lost. Catherine had been born on that land. She had grown up on it. When it was lost, something inside her had broken. 2 years later, she became ill. A year after that, she died. Violet listened. She didn't interrupt once. When Calder finished, the room fell silent. "Is that land still in the Pemford family?" Violet asked. "No, it was sold. It passed to someone else." "Then the thing you wanted from my father wasn't the land." Calder looked at her. "No," he said. "Then what?" A long silence. "I don't know," Calder said. And the answer was unexpected. Hearing "I don't know" from that calm voice that always seemed certain. "When I sat at that table, I knew what I wanted. But when I saw you..." He stopped. Violet waited. "It changed," he said simply. Violet stood and walked to the window. Outside was still gray. Yorkshire always seemed gray. "My father was wrong," she said. Her voice was steady. "I know that. I accept it." She turned. "But I'm not the price for that mistake." Calder looked at her. "I know." "Then why were you sitting at that table?" He stood, not toward the window, toward Violet. 1 step, 2 steps. There was still distance between them, but less than before. "When I saw you at Pembury," he said quietly, "I wanted to come speak to you. I didn't." "Why?" "You were a Pemford." Violet felt something stir inside her. She didn't name it. "And at that table?" "At that table," Calder said. An opportunity appeared. The wrong kind of opportunity. I knew that, but I took it. "Ego?" The man waited a second. "Yes. At the beginning." "At the beginning?" "Yes." Violet looked at him. Those dark eyes, that face that was always calm. But it wasn't completely calm now. Something moved beneath the surface. "This marriage," Violet said, "doesn't close the Pemford matter." "I know. I'm not asking you to forgive my father. I don't want to. But I'm not part of that matter." Calder looked at her for a long time. "You're not," he said. The room fell silent. Outside, the wind moved. The Yorkshire wind, hard and straight. Violet turned and walked toward the door. She stopped at the doorway. "The chest in the east wing," she said. "Catherine's letters. May I read them? All of them?" Calder didn't answer immediately. Then, "Yes." Violet left. As she walked down the corridor, her hands were shaking. This time, it wasn't from anger. November ended. December began. Yorkshire met snow. Thin, light, but persistent. In the mornings, Violet would stand at the window and watch the hills turn white, the trees freeze, the moors fade into pale distance. In London, snow was beautiful. Here it was something else, larger, quieter, more permanent. Violet grew used to that too. She read Catherine's letters in 3 days. All of them, in chronological order. There had been no order in the chest. Violet arranged them herself, checking the dates in the corners, fitting the years together. Catherine had written for 10 years, not regularly. Sometimes there were gaps of months, sometimes letters every day for weeks. She was writing to James, her son, but she had probably never given them to him. Perhaps writing had been enough. Two things filled those letters. The first, the Pemford matter. Again and again, from different angles. Catherine feared her son's hatred, feared that it would consume him, gnaw at him from the inside. The second, something else. Violet read the fifth letter for the third time. James, there is something I must tell you, but I don't know how to say it. What Edward Pemford did was not only about the land. You know this. I know this. But we both stay silent because speaking it would make it real. Violet paused. Not only about the land. She continued. There was something else between your father and Edward, long before you were born. Your father told me, before he died, in his final days. He told me everything, and I have carried it ever since. The letter ended there. The next letter was dated 2 months later. It said nothing about the Pemfords. Violet looked into the chest. Was there another letter? One written between those 2 months, where Catherine had continued? There wasn't. That night at dinner, Violet asked Calder, plainly, directly, without a long introduction. There's something in your mother's letters, she said. She writes that the Pemford matter wasn't only about the land. She says there was something else between your father and Sir Edmund. Calder set down his knife. I know, he said. Violet waited. My mother told me, Calder said. Before she died. He paused, looked at the table. My father and Sir Edmund were friends when they were young. Close friends. Then they started a business together, a small mining company in Yorkshire. A year later, the mine collapsed. The money was gone. Both sides lost. But, Violet began. But, Calder said, my father learned later. The mine hadn't collapsed. Sir Edmund had withdrawn the money, closed the partnership with falsified documents, and saved himself alone. The room fell silent. Something inside Violet sank. My father, Calder continued, never recovered from that blow. 2 years later he died. In debt. Broken. He paused. The land dispute came after that. Sir Edmund kept growing stronger. We kept growing smaller. Violet clasped her hands under the table. Her father, Sir Edmund Pemford, the man who had sat in that chair, buried in debt, whispering, I'm sorry, and long before that, a man who had ruined someone else. Why didn't you tell me? Violet asked. Calder looked at her. What difference would it have made? I would have wanted to know. If you had known, what would you have done? Violet didn't answer, because there was no answer. Truly none. What could she have done if she had known? Would anything have changed? But she still wanted to know. I want to know everything, she said, whether it's good or bad. Calder looked at her. For a long time. I know, he said at last. After that week, something changed. Exactly what had changed, Violet couldn't say. It wasn't something large. Doors didn't suddenly open. Curtains didn't suddenly lift. It was small things. At breakfast, Calder split the newspaper in two. One half for Violet, one half for himself. In the afternoons, when Violet was reading in the library, Calder sometimes came in. He didn't sit. He would just look at the shelves, take something, and leave. But now he didn't simply pause in the doorway and walk past. During evening walks, Violet often walked alone across the snowy moor. Sometimes she heard the sound of a horse in the distance. Once she turned and saw him. Calder was on the hill, mounted, looking down, watching her. Violet turned and kept walking, but her steps slowed a little. One Friday evening, a storm came. A Yorkshire storm was nothing like a London storm. This one was harsher, more real. The wind battered the manor. The windows trembled. Somewhere a door kept slamming. Violet was in the library. The fire burned in the fireplace. Outside was dark. The book was in her hands, but she wasn't reading. She was listening to the wind, to the sound of the house itself. Calder came in. This time he sat, in the armchair opposite her, on the other side of the fire, a glass in his hand. He didn't look at Violet. He looked at the flames. Violet looked at her book. For a while, neither of them spoke. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, not empty, but filled with something. Then Calder spoke. "What do you think of Yorkshire?" Violet closed the book. "It's large. Large. And quiet. Much quieter than London. Does it bother you?" She thought. "No. I'm getting used to it." She paused. "Actually, sometimes it's good. In London, everything was too loud." Calder looked at the fire. "Yes. Why do you rarely go to London?" "Noisy," he said. But there was something at the corner of his mouth, very faint, almost nothing. But there. Violet laughed. A small laugh. Not something she expected. It simply escaped her. But it did. Calder turned. He saw her, laughing, the firelight on her face. And those eyes that were always calm, always distant, changed for a second, very briefly, very quickly. But Violet felt it. The storm lasted through the night. Toward morning, while Violet was sleeping, she heard a sound in the corridor, just outside her door. Footsteps. They stopped. They didn't continue. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. Calder. She didn't know. She couldn't be certain. But she felt it. Why had he stopped? Why hadn't he continued? In the morning, Mrs. Graves came. "Your Grace," she said. Her face looked different than usual, a little more open, a little more human. Part of the east wing was damaged in the storm last night. His Grace went out early to inspect it. Did something happen? The ceiling collapsed. In the chest room. Violet froze. The chest room? Yes. An old storage room. Fortunately, no one was inside. The woman paused. But the things inside. What was inside? Mrs. Graves looked away. Old belongings. Some things left from Lady Catherine. Violet stood up quickly. She was in the east wing. The ceiling had truly collapsed. A large section in the corner. There was dust, debris, cold air pouring in. Violet stepped inside. The chest was no longer in its place. It was beneath the rubble, crushed, its boards broken. Violet dropped to her knees and looked at the wood. The letters were scattered. Some were wet, some were torn, but not all of them. Violet gathered what she could. She carefully straightened the wet ones. She pieced together the torn ones. And at the very bottom, deep under the rubble, there was a letter. It was different from the others. It looked newer, less yellowed. She picked it up, opened it. She had never seen this letter before. James. This is my last letter. I no longer have time to write more, but I want you to know this. What Sir Edmund did not destroy you. It destroyed your father. And me. But not you, because you are still here. And you are still here because you are strong. But that strength leaves you alone. I see it. I have seen it for years. One day, you will close the Pemford matter. How you close it matters. If you close it with revenge, you will become like them. But if there is another way, find it. I love you, my son. Catherine. Violet folded the letter and slipped it into her pocket. She stood. She looked at the rubble, at the scattered letters, at the collapsed ceiling. If you close it with revenge, you will become like them. But if there is another way, find it. Footsteps sounded from outside. Calder was standing in the doorway. He saw her, kneeling among the debris, letters in her hands. Something crossed his face. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I gathered them." Violet stood and held out the letters in her hands. "I couldn't save all of them, but most are here." Calder looked at the letters. He didn't take them immediately. 1 second, 2 seconds passed. Then he took them. And Violet saw that those hands, always calm, always controlled, trembled slightly, just for a second. "Thank you," Calder said. His voice was low, quiet, but real. Violet thought about the last letter in her pocket. She didn't give it to him. Not yet. "You're welcome," she said, and she walked past him. As she moved down the corridor, something was inside her, heavy, warm, the kind of feeling she didn't want to name. Eventually, she did. This man had lost his mother, and for decades, those letters had been the only thing beside him. Violet walked on. This time her hands were not shaking. She carried the last letter for a week, in her pocket, every day. She put it there while dressing in the morning, and took it out at night. She didn't open it again. She had already memorized it, Demua, but she didn't let it go either. If you close it with revenge, you will become like them. Calder had never seen that letter. He didn't know it existed. And Violet postponed it every day. "I'll give it tomorrow, the day after." Not yet. Why not yet? She didn't ask herself. That week, an invitation arrived from London. Lord Ashby's Winter Ball. Every December, the biggest social night in London. The envelope was addressed to Calder, but inside were 2 invitations. Calder placed the envelope on the breakfast table, in front of Violet. "Would you like to go?" he asked. Violet looked at the envelope. "You? I don't usually go." "This time." Calder poured his tea. "This time is different." Violet understood. Society. Appearing as a married couple. Obligation. "All right," she said. They went to London 2 days early. Not to the Pemford house, but to Calder's London residence. It was in Mayfair, large, cold, rarely used. The servants had prepared everything, but the house still felt empty. Violet settled into her room. She looked out at the Mayfair streets. It was London. Familiar sounds, familiar smells. But it felt strange, as if much more time had passed, though it had not even been 2 months. There was a knock at the door. "Come in." It wasn't Calder. It was Agnes, the maid Violet had brought from Yorkshire. She held a small box. "His Grace sent this," she said. Violet opened the box. Inside was a deep burgundy brooch. Fine, delicate, Old craftsmanship. Beneath it was a small note. My mother's. Suitable for tonight. 2 sentences. No signature. Violet held the brooch in her palm. It was cold. Then it warmed. The ball was at Ashby House. It was glittering, crowded, full of music and beautiful people. Violet had expected to feel relief when she returned to London, as if she had come home. But she didn't. Calder was beside her. They walked in arm in arm. A performance, as always. But this time it felt strange. Not like a performance, but something else. The hall divided naturally. Men on one side, women on the other. Violet joined the women. Lady Whitmore approached her. Elderly, kind. The sort who seemed to know everything. "Calder brought you," she said, surprise in her voice. "He never brings anyone." "I'm surprised too," Violet said honestly. The woman laughed softly. "He's a good man," she said quietly. "He seems harsh, but he's good." Violet said nothing. "He loved his mother very much," Lady Whitmore continued. "Catherine, she was a beautiful woman, gone far too early." She paused. "That Pemford matter shook her terribly. If she had known you, I think she would have liked you." Violet looked at the brooch, now pinned at her neck, dark burgundy, catching the light. "I hope so," she said. Near midnight, Violet stepped onto the balcony. The air was cold, London cold, damp and gray. She pulled on her gloves and leaned against the railing. Below, the street lamps glowed faintly. Footsteps came behind her. Calder stepped out. He stood beside her and looked down at the street. "Did the crowd overwhelm you?" he asked. "A little." She paused. "You?" "Always." Violet laughed again. That same unexpected laugh. Calder turned and looked at her. "The first time I saw you at Pembury," he said, "you were laughing." Violet was surprised. "I didn't notice you that night." "I know, but I noticed you." He paused. "You were leaving through the door. You were speaking to the woman beside you. I couldn't hear what you said, but you laughed." He looked out across the balcony. "After I left the room, I came back. I looked for you. You were gone." Something tightened inside Violet. "Why did you come back?" Calder didn't answer immediately. A long silence. The sound of London drifted upward. Carriages, distant music, wind. "Because, he said finally, "when you laughed, I felt something for the first time. For the first time in a long while." The balcony grew quiet. Violet gripped the railing tightly. "And that gambling table," she said. Her voice was steady, though something beneath it was not. "That opportunity." "It was wrong," Calder said, without hesitation. "I know that. When I sat at that table, I wanted to win against Pemford, yes. But when I saw you," he stopped. "When I saw you, that feeling returned, the same one from Pembury, and I used it, in the wrong place, the wrong way." Violet turned to look at him. He was looking down at the street. His profile was dark, but his shoulders had dropped. Slightly. Just slightly. "Do you regret it?" Violet asked. "Yes, the way I did it." He turned toward her. Not that it happened. Inside, the music had changed. Something slow, played by strings. Violet reached into her pocket. She took out the letter. Calder looked at it. Catherine's, Violet said. It was under the rubble. The last letter. I don't think you've seen it. She held it out. Calder took it. Opened it. Read. Violet watched him. His face didn't change as he read, but something moved in his eyes. That thing beneath the surface rose closer to it now. He finished the letter, folded it. For a long time he didn't speak. Then, when did you find this? When the chest collapsed. A week ago. Yes. Why did you wait? Violet thought. She wanted to answer honestly. I was waiting for you to be ready, she said. I think. Calder looked at her. That look, always measured, always calm, was different this time. What was inside it was no longer hidden. Violet, he said, for the first time. In London, on that balcony, in the December cold. Violet took a breath. James, she said, for the first time. Neither of them moved. There was one step between them, perhaps less. Calder lifted his hand, slowly, asking, a movement that didn't force anything. His fingers touched Violet's cheek, cold fingers, but the touch was warm. Violet didn't close her eyes. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he lowered his hand. We should go inside, he said. You're cold. Violet smiled. A small, real smile. I'm not cold, she said. I know, Calder said. But still. They went inside. The hall was still crowded, the music still playing, people still speaking. But Violet saw none of it. She saw the man beside her. And she saw that man, for the first time, that night, in that hall, smiling slightly. Not quite a full smile, but very close. When they returned to Yorkshire, snow was falling. As the carriage moved along the gravel road toward Calder Hall, Violet looked out the window. The manor stood in the snow, gray stone, white ground, black trees. It was still large, still severe, but it felt different this time. The carriage stopped. Calder opened the door, stepped down, and offered his hand to Violet. Violet took it. And this time, stepping down from the carriage, standing in the snow before the doors of Calder Hall, their hands didn't separate. Not until they were inside. It was the last week of December. In Yorkshire, the snow had not stopped. A little more every day. A little more every night. Calder Hall was buried in white. The hills gone. The moors erased. The world had grown smaller. Only the manor remained. Only the inside remained. Violet realized it one morning, standing by the window. Inside is enough now. The thought made her stop. It had been 2 weeks since they returned from London. In those 2 weeks, something had changed. Slowly, quietly, but it had changed. At breakfast, they both talked now, not briefly but at length, about Yorkshire, London, books, Catherine. Calder was still a man of few words, but he spoke to Violet. Only to Violet. In the evenings, they sat by the fire in the library, across from each other. Sometimes in silence, sometimes not. That silence was full now. It no longer felt like the beginning of something, but the middle. And one night Calder had asked her something unusual for him, something he had never asked before. What did you like doing in London? Violet had been surprised. Why are you asking? I was curious. Violet had thought for a moment. Walking early in the morning, before the crowds. She had paused. When no one is around, the city looks different. Calder had looked at her. Yorkshire has that too. It's different. Yes, but it has it. The next morning, when Violet woke early, there was a note at her door. East Hill, at sunrise. She went. Calder was there, on horseback, waiting for her. The two of them watched the sunrise, without speaking, but side by side. That week, a letter arrived, from Sir Edmund Pemford. Violet recognized the envelope, her father's handwriting, the Pemford seal. She opened it. It was a short letter. Violet, I hope you are well. Some things have changed in London. Part of the debts have been cleared. Word came from Calder's lawyer. Our family will have an easier winter because of it. I wanted to thank you for that. I miss you, Arthur. Violet folded the letter and set it on the table. She sat there for a long time. Then she stood and went to find Calder. He was in his study. Violet knocked, entered. Papers were spread across the desk, and he lifted his head. A letter came from my father, Violet said. He mentioned the debts. Calder waited. Your lawyer has taken action. Yes. When? After we came back from London. Violet felt something inside her. She tried to name it. Gratitude. Warmth. Something else. Why didn't you tell me? Calder looked down at the desk. Was I meant to? Yes. She paused. It concerns me. He raised his head and looked at her. I haven't forgiven Sir Edmund, he said. I want you to know that. I haven't forgotten what he did, and I won't. He paused, but I no longer wanted to punish him in order to punish you. The room went quiet. Violet waited. Catherine's letter, Calder said, his voice lower now. You know what it said. If you close it with revenge, you become like them. He looked at the desk. For years I wanted to read that letter, but I never found it. You did. It was chance. I know. He paused. Even so. Violet took a step forward. She stopped in front of the desk. Calder. James. Violet paused. Then, James. He stood. This marriage, Violet said, was wrong at the beginning. We both know that. She paused. But right now, it doesn't feel wrong. Calder looked at her for a long moment. No, he said. It doesn't. That night at dinner, Mrs. Graves came to the table. Your Grace, she said. There was that rare thing on her face. Warmth. We found some of Lady Catherine's old recipes in the kitchen. Agnes asked whether you would like her to try one of them this evening. Violet smiled. Yes, please. Mrs. Graves left. Calder lifted his glass, looked at Violet. You liked Catherine, he said. It wasn't a question. I never knew her, Violet said. But I came to know her through her letters. She paused. She was a strong woman, and she loved you very much. Calder said nothing, but his eyes, those eyes that were always calm, always distant, filled, not enough to spill over, but they filled. Violet said nothing more. Sometimes that was enough. 2 days before New Year's, Sir Edmund Pemford came. He hadn't told anyone. When the carriage pulled up at the doors of Calder Hall, Violet saw it from the window. She recognized it. Something tightened inside her. She went downstairs. Her father was in the drawing room. He had grown smaller. even smaller than before over these past 2 months. But when he saw Violet, his eyes came alive. Violet. Violet stopped, near the door. Father, I wanted to see you. He clasped his hands together. I came without sending word, I'm sorry, but... He stopped. I wanted to apologize, to your face. Some things cannot be said in a letter. Violet said nothing. What I did, Sir Edmund said, was wrong. Toward you, toward this family, toward the Calder family, in the past and now. His eyes were red. A man does certain things in his life, and then he carries them. I've carried too much, for too long. Violet searched for that great, burning anger inside herself. It was still there, but it burned less now. I know, Father, she said. Her voice was steady. But an apology is not enough. I told you that. I know. Then what is enough? The man thought. Truly thought. Time, he said at last. And for you to be whole. Violet looked at her father, at that smaller, tired man whose hands were shaking. She couldn't forgive him. Not yet. But she didn't want to close the door either. Will you have tea? She asked. Her father's eyes filled. Yes, he said. I will. Sir Edmund left that afternoon. Calder had not left his study that day. He had seen the man arrive, had known. But he had not interfered. When the carriage was gone, Violet turned back inside. Calder was waiting in the corridor. Are you all right? He asked. Violet thought about it. She wanted an honest answer from herself. I don't know, she said. But better. Calder inclined his head. The snow will be heavier tonight, he said. Mrs. Graves is preparing a few things for New Year's. Violet smiled. The Yorkshire way? There is no other kind here. On New Year's Eve, the manor felt different. Mrs. Graves had arranged everything. The food, the candles, the fire. Agnes had put flowers on the table. Even Thomas had come inside, sitting quietly in the corner. As Violet sat at the table, she looked around. It was not a large table anymore. It had been shortened, at the corner, side by side. And around it were people. The servants, the household. A meal made from one of Catherine's recipes. Calder was beside her. Near midnight, everyone drifted away. The manor grew quiet. Violet and Calder remained by the fire, as usual, but not across from each other this time. Side by side. Outside, snow was falling. Violet, Calder said. She turned. He was looking at her. With those eyes, she knew now. I want to ask whether you wish to leave this marriage, he said. His voice was steady, but what lay beneath it was not. The agreement was wrong from the beginning, and no one should be forced to stay in something that began wrongly. Violet waited. If you want to go, he said, everything is ready. A carriage, money, a house in London. Your Pemford family is secure. You are secure. He paused. No one will keep you here. The room was silent, only the crackling of the fire. Violet looked at the flames. Leave. London. Morning walks, familiar streets, the crowds. Freedom. Real freedom chosen by her. Stay. Yorkshire. Snow. Sunrises on the hill. A newspaper at breakfast. Silence in the library. Catherine's recipes. And this man, this cold, distant man who carried so much inside him, who spoke little but meant everything he said. Violet turned. At that gambling table, she said, you won me. Calder waited. But I'm choosing to stay here. She paused. This time it isn't a gamble. This time it's my choice. Calder's eyes changed. Those eyes that were always calm, always distant, always controlled. This time they were hiding nothing. He lifted his hand, slowly, touched Violet's hand, and took it. Outside, snow was falling. The Yorkshire moor was white. The hills were gone. The world had grown small. But inside was warm. And Calder Hall, that great, gray, severe manor that seemed to have risen from the hills themselves, felt like a home for the first time that night. Some things begin the wrong way. A gambling table, a signature, a suitcase. But where they end, that belongs to choice. And Violet Pemford had made hers. For herself. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.